Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome back to Funnel Reboot. This is our continuing series on career upgrades. And today, we're talking all things musical and analytical.
Learning data is not hard. Everybody can just start. Data people are real nice, but sure just ask.
How about what music has to do with analytics?
Don't cry for now, it's just Excel. Not everybody learned to use SQL, but it's not too late for some upskilling. Let's have some patience, it will get better.
Or rather, musical playlists for analysts?
Somewhere there is a dashboard to be found with all the KPIs that you're wondering about.
Oh, that was actually musicals about analytics, as imagined by the talented songwriter Kai Feng. Shout out to him. Please go check out his music on YouTube. While that's one meaning of analytics and music, I'm going for a different meaning in this episode. We're looking at a musician's work style and seeing what analysts can adopt from it. According to today's guest, these two disciplines have much in common. Our guest is a father, a grandfather, and a string musician who plays in and is president of the Milwaukee Mandolin Orchestra. He's also a conversion rate optimization, Google Analytics, and Google Tag Manager expert, having been a founding member of the web development agency Northwoods, which just celebrated 25 years in business. He has also shared his knowledge through various courses and at CXL, better known as Conversion Excel, and at sessions he has presented at Superweek. He approaches marketing analytics in much the same way as he approaches his musical performance. So let's listen to what analysts can learn from musical artists in my chat with Fred Pike. So glad to welcome Fred Pike. Welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thank you, Glenn. Delighted to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our chat.
So am I. And we're going to give listeners a bit of a different take today because what we're going to talk about is all about mandolins. Oh, no, sorry. Scratch that. Okay. We are going to talk about mandolins.
Good.
But we're going to just on the way getting there, we're going to talk about the right way to function as an analyst and how to stay current with all the things that are going on.
Sounds good. Yep.
I will probably put myself up as the poster child, at least my past self, for how not to do it. Let me tell you what I was used to doing when, let's say, a boss would come by and ask me, hey, we need a certain tag change. Hey, we need a certain report from our website. I would say, great. And as they're walking away, I'm opening up a search engine and I'm starting a random search on how to do that thing. I imagine you don't endorse that kind of approach. What's wrong with that, Fred?
You can trust everything you find on the search engines. You don't need to know anything. Just rely everything on the search engine. There, did that answer your question, Glenn?
Well, that's a wrap, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. So it's obviously where it leads to is a colossal waste of time, right?
Yeah.
And conflicting information.
And it's not just the search engines. I mean, everybody's using ChatGPT now, and that gives you bad information so much of the time, but it phrases it so well. It's like, oh, this has got to be correct.
Legit.
And oh my God, is that hard? You really have to know what you're looking at and what you're talking about to figure out what's wrong in the ChatGPT answers.
Yeah. So if I were to dissect what I think is wrong about this, the issue is that we have to be careful of how we use our time. and we have to be aware that as professionals, our time when we are actually performing a task isn't the only time that we're going to have to devote to our craft.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I went wrong. And I just didn't see that, oh, there's more to this. Now, to be fair, once a year, I'd get maybe 2 or 3 days to go to some conference, and maybe I would watch the odd thing, read the odd article about how to do things, but I would look at it and say, oh, that was great. And out it goes.
It's gone.
So what do you do? What kind of discipline do you ask people to use when they're trying to get that information that they're going to need at some uncertain point in the future?
So, Glenn, that is a great question. And I think there's 2 aspects to that. First of all, I think you have to set time aside regularly to sharpen the saw, as they say, as that old saw goes. Mm-hmm. And so having regular time to either learn on your own, to go through courses, to attend the conferences and try to apply some of the stuff, which is, I would say 98% of the people who go to a conference love it, but don't apply anything once they get back. I mean, just made that up, but whatever, that's probably true. But I think it's that time that's important, but it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Where do you apply the time because you want to be good in the future, which is part of it, but is that the only thing, or is it because you're really intellectually curious? You really enjoy this. You really want to dive down into it. You want to discover more of whatever it is that your practice is. And then that gets applied later. And I think it's the latter one. I think you've got to have that intellectual curiosity. And it's more than that. It's emotional satisfaction from the work that you're doing, from the studying that you're doing in it. And sure, you could be, I mean, many of us went through college or whatever. We took courses that we didn't necessarily like, but we had to take them. So you spend the time and you've got to do that because there is an end goal. But that's not I don't think that's what we're doing at work, or hopefully that's not what there's some of that, of course. But I hope our work is around something that we really get satisfaction out of. And I go back to that intellectual curiosity. And for me, analytics and GTM just drove that passion. And it's like, God, this is so cool. It really spoke to me. It changed my career 7-8 years ago as I started getting into it. It's like, oh my God. And so I feel very lucky that I stumbled into a field and really stumbled into it where it appealed to me. It really intellectually, emotionally, all those ways. I just love it. There's a passion about it. So
yeah. So yes, I won't put it as elegantly as you did, but the days of us having, let's say, a professional title, but truly our work just resembling us twiddling knobs, that's over.
Yeah.
Right. So there's we can't go back. Those boats have been burned. And that's done. So I'm telling people there's not much of a choice here, but there is a choice. And I think the choice that you're speaking of is to think of it as a vocation.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. I want to know this stuff. If the data is somehow going to help us, I want to find it. And you have some parallels with this that come from a totally different realm of that of a musician. Yes. So why don't you tell us about how a musician thinks about why they are looking at musical piece after musical piece?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to shut up about either GA, GTM, or music, and I really started getting serious about music in high school, and I was playing drums in a rock band, and the bass player started to teach me guitar, and that just spoke so intensely to me. And I remember that first Christmas holiday, right when I was learning to play guitar, I played for hours. And it wasn't that, I'm going to go and practice. it's like, oh my God, this is so cool. I really want to learn this. And it got to the point that, I mean, I had huge calluses on my fingers and I could put them on a radiator and not feel anything. And if somebody had said, Fred, you have to practice 6 hours a day or whatever, it's like, oh crap, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But if it's driven from, I love this instrument, I really want to get better at it. It's the enjoyment of it. And I think that's that passion again too. So I still do a lot of guitar. That's probably my main instrument, but for the last few years, I've been very active in the mandolin world. And there's a history of mandolin orchestras in the U.S. It started in 1880, and there was a craze from 1880 to 1930. The Milwaukee Mandolin Orchestra was started in 1900, so it's been going for 123 years now. And I'm the current president. I feel like I'm standing on this long, long tradition. So what's involved with that is it is kind of like the analytics. One, you have to have a passion. You have to be curious about it, and you have to put in the time. You've got to put in the practice time to really work on, okay, what are the tricky sections? What am I stumbling on? What am I not doing well? And I think that carries over so much into analytics and GTM and everything too. I don't need to practice creating a GA4 config tag in GTM. That's done. The things I need to work on are tracking some weird user interaction on the website or some different type of interaction that only occurs on your website, but not other ones. So I feel like I'm getting off track here. See, you got me started to talk about music, and now I lost the thread. But it's that same thing. It's getting emotional satisfaction from it, being really curious with it, and just diving down. So getting down to what is giving you trouble and working on that. And that's what pays off when you perform. That's what's, people go to see a musician or they're watching a live band or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, that looks like so much fun. And it is. But behind that, you're spending hours and hours and hours in a practice room working on your technique, working on your expression, working on the fine points of your playing. And I mean, that's exactly the same thing I think you should be doing with your career, with the stuff that you're working on. And so I just think there's such a strong crossover between those two.
For sure. Okay, lots there, Fred.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. But I think where I want to just make a remark about, I imagine there are some people listening, perhaps they are now, working on their Google Analytics 4. This is a decent amount of work that they do. They think of it as being rather by rote. And some might say, well, I'm not a creative person. I don't see the ties to a musician who would just play, right, as the word says,
right,
play my instrument. That's not me. I would challenge them because I think if you've found your way into such a niche area as working on an analytics platform or other related data that has to do with this, it's your subconscious that has drawn you to this. You do have that latent need for intellectual curiosity. Don't tell me you didn't,
right.
You didn't just show up one day and they were like, well, do you want to, move pallets down at the dock or do you want to work on digital analytics? So,
right.
So I just want to kind of hit that head on. But the part that you said about the practice. So this is a whole other area. This is not just a few minutes of your spare time. This can be a part of your work if you, draw the bounds large enough to encompass it.
Yeah.
And so take us into a bit of the technique of practice. Take us into maybe what it's like to read a sheet of music and try to get through it, try to maybe break things down into small enough bite-sized problems so that when it comes time later for you to actually do the thing, you're ready.
Yeah. So with music, you have sheet music in front of you, let's say, or you're reading whatever you've got in front of you. Much of it is going to be relatively easy. You can get through it, but it's the areas where all of a sudden there's a fast scale or there's something difficult going on. That's where you need to focus, and so you break it down into the smallest component that you feel comfortable with. Maybe it's just 3 notes, and you work on those 3 notes, and then you add a couple of notes on either side of that, and you might play those forward. You might play those backwards, and playing them backwards is incredibly useful in drilling muscle memory into you. So I do a lot of playing the difficult sections backwards, and usually I don't play them backwards live in concert, but but I do in the practice room. So it really is a matter of identifying the problem areas, breaking it down to the smallest component, drill that, get that well. Get it up to speed and expand beyond that section, and then put it together with the rest of it.
Perfect.
The rest of the music.
And I've seen times where musicians are even using what's not the final piece they're going to play, but they'll grab a sheet that just has scales or just has some interesting, like if it's a hand instrument that has some really gnarly, hand motions involved. And I've got to think that that's something similar to taking a course that you, in an area that you've not yet gotten your hands dirty on, or listening to a podcast or reading a blog or watching something on YouTube. That's an important part, that you're just getting your mind and your muscle memory going on those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the muscle memory is important, and it's physical with an instrument, but it's mental with when you're listening to the podcast, when you're watching a course or whatever.
Yeah.
And Glenn, scales are a great example. You don't do scales because you love scales. You do scales because they're going to be used in a piece of music at some point, and you just can rip through them. You don't have to worry about it.
And you don't know when. So
yeah,
this
exactly.
This is the huge part for me, is if you find yourself in the middle of a module of a course and you're saying, I don't know when I'm going to need this. Like we all used to say in school,
right?
Hey, teacher, is this going to be on the test?
When will I ever need geometry?
Right?
Yeah, right.
But the point is, that's life.
Yeah.
When we are absorbing that thing and maybe making a note about it, we don't know when we're going to need it. In fact, that's the very reason. There would be no reason for making a note if you had a crystal ball that would say, need, don't need.
Yes.
Right? So you have to kind of go on the premise, well, I may need it. And if I may need it, if there's a greater than 0 chance, I've got to practice this, or I've got to make a note of it.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you make notes.
So there's 2 different ways. Let's talk about like a course first. So I've taken obviously several courses over my career, and for me, what works best is to, go through a section of the course and take notes on it. That helps me internalize it quite a bit. And I end up, when I'm done with a course, like a Jeff Sauer analytics course or a Simo Hava GTM course or whatever, I have like 80 pages of notes. I mean, literally 80 pages of notes. And that does 2 things for me. One, it helps me solidify the information, make sure that I'm not just watching the video while I'm, watching cat videos on my phone or whatever. So I'm paying attention enough to put it into my own words. And then 2, there's so much information in any course that you're taking that I'm not going to remember it all. But I can go back into those documents and do a Control F and find, okay, what's a term that I'm looking for and where was it explained? And then because I do mark where in the course that came from, obviously I know what lesson it was or whatever, I can go back and watch that section if I need to, or my notes are a good enough refresher or whatever. So for me, the notes that I take on the courses are just absolutely critical.
And when it comes to music, how do the notes or the markings that you make on a sheet of music help you?
Yeah, I think that's, if you're not a musician, you're not aware of this, but it's so, when you're playing with a group, the group decides or the director decides, okay, here we're going to slow down, or here we're going to, play louder or softer or whatever. And our director, the director of the Milwaukee Mandolin Orchestra, says the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind. Because if you just write something down on the music, like watch the conductor here or slow down here, there's going to be a rit, we call it here, a retardando. That's the word. Then you know that. And if you just trust it on your memory, it's like, yeah, I don't remember what we did a week ago. I don't remember what that is. So you've got to write it down. You have to have your own notes, written notes, not musical notes, on the paper. And the one that I love the best is when you draw a pair of eyeglasses on that, and that says, look up from your music and look at what the director is trying to impart at that point in time. And I just love that phrase, the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind, because we all think, oh, I'll remember that, and we don't. And that's why that's why I like annotations and universal analytics, which we don't have in GA4, may come at some point.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And then for me, where that really comes in often is in the GTM containers. So anytime I'm doing something that I read about on a blog, for example, I'll reference you can do notes on any trigger tag variable in GTM. So I put notes in there with a link to the blog saying, oh, I saw this on Julius's blog or Simo's blog or whatever, and I have a note to it. And then each time I publish a GTM container, I try to put pretty detailed notes in there as well to say, this is what changed in this container, so that 6 months from now, I will remember when I go in to that container and try to figure out what's going on or whatever.
Yeah. And we're in a case there where that eyeglasses and the fact that you're looking up, you're also doing a good favor to your colleagues. Because if somebody, not you, wants to come along and see, okay, what did Fred do? More importantly, why did he do it? And can I get rid of it?
Yes.
Or if I do something else, will I break it? Now, all of that is laid out and clear, and everybody is going to at least keep moving forward. I find much of the time in analytics, we are going 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And it's just because we didn't take notes.
Yeah. Glenn, that's an excellent point. I don't think about it personally so much as my colleagues, which I should be, because usually I'm the person who goes in 6 months from now. I think of
sure. So the colleague here is future you.
No, but you're absolutely right. It's just as critical because I work in an agency and we do have other people coming into the containers. I always think of, okay, the Fred 6 months from now, let's leave a note for him so that he remembers what I did. But the colleagues is an excellent point. God, thank you, Glenn.
No problem. And this note taking that we do, if you're like me, and again, there's an infinite variety of ways to do this. The one right way to do it is the way that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
But so you did highlight one thing, put it in your own words. Mm-hmm. I'll come back to that in a second. But the thing that I do is review it from time to time. Or if you're not jammed with calls and you are going back into your notes to look for a certain thing, if it's in, let's say, a document or, just a long list of things, take a look above, take a look below. Mm. This might be similar to if you're getting ready to play a new piece, maybe, on your music stand, if you shuffle back a few pages, you see, that was sort of similar. We had a key change just like that. And I did that 6 months ago. How did I do it then? And your notes are the beautiful shortcuts that kind of get your brain, because your brain has made an association, but there might be a word that needs to dislodge that association and bring it to the fore.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
Do you consider like, okay, when you're doing either a piece of music or that, do you think of the notes that you're taking just as like a draft. Like you're like, okay, this is what I thought as of this day. And then a month later I came along, okay, I'm changing it a bit. I'm revising it. And I know more now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that happens all the time with our music. The director is changing some things, and he never wants to have the exact same interpretation each time. It can change based on audience reactions or our growth as an orchestra, his
Yep.
growth as a conductor, whatever. So yeah, and I play in a church each week. I play bass in a church each week, and many of the pieces are the same, over the course of a couple of years or whatever,
Sure.
but we do different things. We have different intros, we have different tags, all types of stuff. So yeah, we're erasing that stuff all the time and adding new notes.
I'm gonna try a quote on you for size here,
Okay.
and this is from a gentleman who has gone very deep into the world of how notes are made and the process of actually cataloging. There are systems out there, if people ever want to Google it, for how you can have a file index of your notes, and we don't need to worry about all that, but just think like a library catalog. And
Sure.
when he wrote about this, he said, the series of notes you make develops into arguments shaped by theories and ideas and mental models you have in your head. And the theories, ideas, and mental models in your head are also shaped by the things you read. So the brain bender in there is, we've got to embrace that change. The piece of music is not played the same way twice.
Right.
The way that you are understanding how to do this particular analytics task is not the exact same way twice. And I hope that you choose to come to love that. If you don't, I would suggest that you go work in a trade like horseshoes or something that isn't going to change anymore, because we figured out everything there is to know about doing that.
Glenn, that is so true. I mean, I look at like some of my early GA4 implementations just to grab something, and it's like, oh my God, I would never do that now. And that's good. I mean, I don't want to be doing the exact same thing every day, whether it's in music or in GTM or GA or whatever. I want to grow. I want my growth to be reflected in the work that I'm doing.
So sometime in between the first implementation and the current implementation, you gave yourself a software upgrade.
Excellent point.
Right?
Excellent
That's
point.
kind of
right.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
So I hope that by this point we've kind of gotten people interested in how they're making notes, whether they are putting them, as you said, right inside of the published notations or on the individual elements. But, let's extend this for a quick second. If we talk about our friends over in development, would you say to them, hey, indulge me here, take that Python or R, please mark that up, put some comments in that. It's just a best practice all around, right?
Oh my God, Glenn. I mean, early in my career, I was a developer. So for about 10 years, I was a developer. And the documentation, the notes in the code are just critical. And yeah, it's the same thing. You're not going to remember, either you 6 months from now won't remember, or this is for your colleagues or other people looking at it. You've got to, well, you don't have to. You should be putting in documentation and notes in your code. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. It's important. And I know that you even kind of go broader than that to say, hey, if you play in these public communities, whether it's GitHub or if you're looking over into LinkedIn or something, then don't be afraid. Show a few warts. Post it there too. Hey, I just learned this.
Glenn, again, it's amazing how people who know things really well don't know like a tiny little part of it. And that happens to me all the time. And it's like, oh, Oh, I never knew that. And so I love to post that. It's like, and I see this well, I used to on Twitter, not so much anymore, but it's like, I was this day old when I discovered that chocolate ice cream tastes good or whatever.
Yeah. And so we've got to get over it's because it is a little weird to think, okay, you have this vocation and you're hopefully being compensated well for being an expert on something, but yet you're being honest about something the expert doesn't know. Right. Yeah. So that we feel some dissonance there, and we just got to push through it.
And actually that happened fairly recently with me. So if we dive just a bit into the weeds with analytics,
sure.
For a long time there in GA4, there was the question of what to do with form submissions. Do you use the generate_lead, which is kind of where Google is pushing you? It's one of the standard events. Or do you create your own form submitted? And now they actually have a form submit event that's part of the enhanced measurements. But there's been this long debate on should you use generate lead? Because if you look at the parameters that are around generate lead, it's currency and value. And if I'm a lead gen site and my main thing is getting people to fill out a form, the thing I want to know is, okay, what form was it? What page were they on? And particularly the form. It's much harder to apply a value to that. Currency is easy. Value, you can make stuff up, and you can actually kind of get it scientifically. But for me, that's why generate lead never worked. And there was a little bit of a discussion in the industry. You should use generate lead because it's that standard lead or standard event, and GA's machine learning is going to be able to apply all their knowledge on that and all the other websites and stuff like that. But what I just discovered is that unless you use that currency and value in that, those are required fields in the generate lead event. And if you don't use those parameters, then it's a custom event. So I'm not sure that I didn't realize that till like a month ago. And I don't think that's common knowledge. I think there's been all this discussion around you have to use a standard event of generate lead. And I bet you most people are not putting in currency and value. So it becomes a custom event. So that whole discussion is moot.
Yeah. I think in my case, I just have dropped in a dummy value there, but I could have stepped right on the landmine with not putting anything in there and then having it show as a custom event. Yeah. Just one example of, and right. As you say that, my mind goes to, well, if while you're doing it, let's say the old way, but you're at least putting something in the description column, then when you have this long list to look through, you have saved yourself so much time because you know where to go and revise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So there's just so much good that comes with this kind of documentation. We're going to cover what I think is the last and perhaps the most important level of this, staying current and gaining mastery. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Do you have a lot of company data in reach, but struggle to get useful business insights out of it? Do you open up your Google Analytics, but find you're at a loss on how to get it reporting the way you want? Do you wonder what new marketing strategies you could leverage if you could just unlock what's in your data? If you said yes, then you sound just like other clients did when they started working with me. Many B2B companies who I've done project work with have been helped by modernizing their analytics. Some deploy dashboards, some activate their data using machine learning in their campaigns. As of this recording in fall of 2023, my schedule is opened up enough to accommodate 1 or 2 projects. Should you be ready to begin a project, let's talk about what you would like your analytics to do for you. Please reach out today via the podcast feedback channels or connect with me, Hey Glenn S, 2 N's on Glenn, on either Twitter or Instagram. Or search up Marketing Analytics People on LinkedIn. I'm usually the first Glenn that pops up. Okay, let's get back to the show. Fred, I haven't told you this, but I'm married to a teacher. And my teacher spouse has told me about this thing called Bloom's taxonomy. And it sounds complicated, but it's really nothing more than the explanation of, how we go from not knowing something to knowing something. And the steps that it goes through, pretty simple. First you kind of get something in and you remember it, but just by rote. Then the next one up is understand. The next one is apply. I think you can tell where I'm going here.
Yeah.
The next one is analyze, which to me means kind of like dissect and, really get what's going on. The next one is evaluate. And the last one is create.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Create, which to me means that you could go and let somebody else go through that process that you went through. So you've been able to get that good at it that you can explain it and give someone an outcome like the one you now have.
Yeah.
You've created courses.
Yes.
You have spoken at industry conferences. And this is obviously another way that you are taking time out. And I would imagine even in the music realm, you have probably held small clinics.
Given workshops.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So can you give us a little peek behind the curtain there on what you, as the person who's still deepening your knowledge of it, what do you get out of doing that?
Oh my God, Glenn, that is a great question. And the way I deepen my knowledge is by teaching others. That is, I've always loved teaching. Throughout my career, I've always taught technical courses. I'm thinking way back, but at any rate, so that's always been a passion of mine, just being able to explain to other people. So that's part of it, that I do have a passion for that. But the huge benefit for me is that if I'm going to explain this, if I'm going to teach this, if I'm going to stand up in front of people, I damn well better understand this intimately. And, if I might be presenting 5% of the knowledge that I have, so I better have a big backup to support, my actually talking to you. So I love teaching because it teaches me. I also love teaching because I like imparting knowledge, but I love the it teaches me aspect. It's how I get deep into an example. And, I just did 2 GA4 courses for CXL, a beginner and an intermediate one. And I knew GA4 pretty well. I've worked with it for years now, but I learned more in developing these courses because, if I'm going to explain something, I really want to understand the nuance. So it was a tremendous learning experience for me. And I hope for my students ultimately too. And so far I've gotten really good feedback, which is awesome. But yeah, it's a selfish thing. It's like, I want to learn this better.
Or let's call it win-win.
There you go. I like that. That's better than selfish. You're right. but that's why you're the podcaster.
That's okay. But what I think, so let's take it to an interactive realm, like where, you're doing an in-person workshop.
Yeah.
What I love to watch, either when I'm leading it or when I see somebody else leading it, is that when a question is asked and the question isn't immediately, related to what we've just talked about, right? Like, it's not like you could just regurgitate what's on the slide and there's your answer, student. The student, the question is deeper or farther afield. What I really love to see is when someone has spent so long internalizing that body of knowledge, they can just reflexively and intuitively come up with it.
Yeah.
Right. And those words have never come out of their mouth before.
Right.
But on the fly, they just pull it together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another way of saying that, I'm presenting 5% of the knowledge that I have. And it's the way I can answer those questions is because I'm pulling on that other 95%.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got to think that there's something in playing music. Now, it may be different genres. This may be more for jazz than it is for, let's say, classical. But to be able to do a little bit of improvisation is the mark of someone who's truly expert at it?
They can play within the lines. You're not just reading the notes or reading the chord charts or whatever. You are adding your interpretation to it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works great. And obviously in jazz, that's, the main thing you're doing. But even within classical music, even within written music, like I play in the pit a lot for musicals. And sometimes it's very written out, but sometimes it's like, do this in the style of, Freddie Green or whatever. Yeah. It's like, all right, it's up to you. And
sure.
So, yeah, you're never going to have, you're always going to have your own interpretation of the music and the way you play it. And that's how you can tell different guitarists. You can, hear
Yes.
Jimi Hendrix, it's Jimi Hendrix right away.
Right.
It's not Eddie Van Halen,
Right.
So even if they're playing the exact same Star Spangled Banner or whatever,
Sure.
You would know which one is which. And so, you get to add your spin to it.
Staying with that. One of the things that, staying with the playing in areas where you're stretching yourself. I see a strong parallel. You made a comment that in a talk I watched about how you don't necessarily just want to sit among those who are playing the exact same thing as you. So I want you to tell us a little bit about that, but the reason why I'm asking it is a person in analytics role may often be pulled into meetings with an executive decision maker, a person who isn't even in marketing. Maybe they're the head of sales. Maybe they're the head of customer service. And this is going to be uncomfortable. There's no qualms about that. Yeah. But you say to do it anyway. Can you tell us why you feel that?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it does get a little bit back to that concept of intellectual curiosity. So what else is happening in the business? You're not doing analytics just, in a black box, or maybe you are, but there's other things happening in the business, and how can your understanding of that drive your implementation of analytics, your interpretation of the analytics, the things you need to add or whatever. You have to know what else is going on. You don't have to. I strongly recommend you understand the things that are going on around you. And the example, there's several examples of this, but in my music world, I'm a member of the Classical Mandolin Society of America. So we get 180 people each year coming into different cities and playing together as a big orchestra. And you have a choice. So I play second mandolin. I'm not a super strong mandolin player, so I play second mandolin. I could be in the middle of 50 other M2s, or it's second mandolins.
Yep.
Or I could be on the edge where I'm either right next to a mandolin one player with a guitar player behind me and maybe a mandocello player behind me. And that's the spot that I love, the interface with the rest of the orchestra, or the interface with the rest of the company, moving it to analytics. That's where it all comes together. I don't want to just hear the second mandolin part. I want to hear how that works flowing in and out of the first mandolin part, or the mandocello part, or the mandola part, or whatever. That to me is the fun part of music, is how all those parts interact and relate. And that to me is also that's why I love talking to clients about analytics. It's like, what are the things that are important on your website? What's the purpose of the website? What are you trying to track? What do you want to know that your users are doing? Let's figure that stuff out. Let's figure out the business reasons for this, and then track that and help you make the decisions that are going to move your business forward. That, to me, that's what it's all about. It's not just, we had 14 users, in the last hour. Who cares? What do they do? How did that drive your business? What are the important things that you want to measure, that you want to know about your visitors? Why they came to your website? Let's track that.
Yeah. And so I see another benefit on top of the one you've mentioned, which is, you're getting that interface and you're feeling, how their instruments are working. Like you get to, kind of see into their world.
Yeah.
But the other side of it, I think, has more bearing on helping you in your career, which is, because you might say, well, Glenn, this is punishing. Well, okay, it's a little bit harder. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they can hear your own voice or your own M2. You're not all glumped into the section. So they're hearing you. And they know that if they ask you a question or if you're saying something to them, you've done that autonomously.
Yeah.
That came right out of you. And people give props for that. People understand, it's like the classic interview question, well, were you on that project or were you the lead?
Right.
So that's I think a huge part of also why you want to be sitting in that middle spot where, you are going to have to by yourself perform, but you're also going to, be heard as yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent point, Glenn. It's your chance for your voice to be heard, and that can make a difference to the other people, to the organization. And I think what stops people, let me just go on a little bit of a tangent. I think what stops people is that they're afraid. It's a scary situation. They don't know sales or they don't know production or whatever, so they don't want to be involved there. But both musically and professionally, I've kind of made it a point to always say yes, which is not necessarily the smartest life decision. But and my wife yells at me at times, but it's like, I know this is terrifying, but I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to deal with the fear because I think I'm going to come out better on the other side of it.
It's the only way to get that experience.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
I'm just going to ask in one different way. I still think we might have some cynics out there, and I want to drown it out of them. But let's pretend. Well, we don't have to pretend. But think of a conductor, and their choices of how they arrange people. But so in your own case, your day to day is as one of the leaders of a good size marketing agency, and you have people underneath you who are analysts. Some who may be on the timid side, some who, are very good at what they do, but aren't sure if they want to put their voice out there.
Right.
But in either situation, if the individual contributor is willing to do that little bit extra to show their knowledge, to show that they've put in the practice, and to be willing to stand apart for it, I've got to ask you, would you, as their boss, be thinking about pulling them into another meeting with a new client and giving them another opportunity to shine?
Yes, absolutely. And we certainly have analysts like that who are concerned and scared in some areas, and we try to introduce it. We try to give them support to do that. We're not just going to throw them into the deep end and say, "Hey, you're on your own." We really make a point of mentoring them and trying to bring them along the line and get them involved at some level, and then grow that responsibility. And I think I think you have to do that if you're going to have people that are going to grow and that are going to help your business grow. We have a guy who's just brilliant in PPC. And when we hired him, he said, "No, I'm not going to join you guys because you guys do webinars or at that point live things, and that terrifies me. Public speaking terrifies me." And so I talked to him with one of my coworkers, and I said, "You are great, and we're really sorry to lose you. I hope your career goes great." And we were willing to let him go, because if he really didn't want to do this, but then after talking to us, he said, "You know what? I'm just going to face that fear. I think this company is supportive enough that I can come here and be safe, not be exposed in an unsafe environment, and you will bring me along. And that's what we've done. And I'm so glad he joined us. He is, I just love him as a person, as a PPC person, and now as a presenter too. He's just so damn good at it. It's like, wow.
Right.
And he almost didn't join us because he was so afraid of doing that.
There's the proof positive, right? That kind of, if you've really taken this on and you say, I know this material, then even the stage fright of speaking in front of a public audience about it, even that can evaporate with, like you said, the right supports in place. But just this point about being willing to have your voice heard on its own versus I was in a group.
Yeah. Right.
It's little things like that can help the people around you say, hey, there's something here.
Yeah.
Maybe what do they say? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's I think
true.
One of those,
Yeah.
all you got to do is just put your toe over the line.
Yeah.
And at that point you'll be amazed. I'm sure you'll be amazed at what ends up happening out of it. So Fred, we've talked a little bit about your agency, but we don't know the name of it yet. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do there and how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the agency is Northwoods. We are in Milwaukee, actually in Shorewood, Wisconsin, right at the first suburb outside of Milwaukee. 45 people, and we started actually as a software dev shop, and at some point added the digital marketing side to it too. So we're pretty evenly split between software dev and digital agency, which is a unusual combination. But I'm on LinkedIn. And I'm sure in the show notes we can put in my actual. So I'm still on Twitter. God knows how long I'm going to be on Twitter. I'm trying Threads. I've tried Mastodon. I'm looking for any good alternative, but
it's pretty easily reachable.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for giving us the whole story of mandolin playing and as well analytics, Fred.
Glenn, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks. Great questions. And man, I love talking to you.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.